Okay, I think that's legible. I'm going back and forth between my screen and the recording and the live video and trying to figure this out. Okay, I think that if you look at this on a normal size screen, that the text in the editor is visible. Let's see if I can get an Emacs up there as well. Doop-doo-doo. Hello, OBS. Now in Emacs, changing font sizes is a little trickier, so I am going to use stupid OBS tricks. I'm going to try to use stupid OBS tricks. Transform. Okay, so what I want to do is gosh, I wish I knew a quick way of saying to OBS, please double the size of this in every direction. That would be nice. Scale filtering, maybe. No. Resize output is coming up with source size. So OBS does things like rotate and flip and center and fill the screen, none of which I want to do. So can I just type this in? So if I want to double size, so as long as I don't resize my Emacs window, we're golden. So that'll be available when I need it. Yay! Don't need to see that. Don't need to see that. And I am going to place my editors off screen. They'll still show in place in the video, but they won't be in my way. I'll need to remember that. Okay, I think we're set up. Cup of coffee while I load it up. Okay, so where were we? I had just done some flights. I had a craft that could almost make it to orbit, and I had kOS scripting that got us there. So before I go further and start building new craft that's bigger and better and does more things, let's go back to the code. I had something I wanted to do, and now suddenly it's gone from my mind. I had a bit of refactoring. And it's completely gone. Well, if it's important, I'll remember later. So just to quickly review, the core of our code is this Farsyte module, and the design of it is based entirely around import and export. So as a module, you have something specific you are exporting, some value. It might be a lexicon, which gives your callers access to various different methods and data structures and so on, or you might just export a function delegate, which is not uncommon, especially for really simple packages. For instance, if you are importing something that is just one method, like circularize or ascend to a thing, in any case, that's up to the module, so the module can export any kind of value it wants. And we tuck it in the table. On the other side is people that want to use it. They import. I wasn't showing this. Hold on. But boop, there we go. So there's export. We get called with the module value, and we stash it in this lexicon called module values under the name. So now anybody can ask for module by name through import, and they will get it back. If it's not loading, first thing is we try to get a copy of the source code from the path, and basically copy it from the archive to the spacecraft. That includes, whatever's on the spacecraft. We don't care. We're going to copy it from the archive, so we get a new version if we reboot, and then we try running the local version. So if we don't have a connection with the reboot, we can run whatever we had left. So we have to keep the modules on the vehicle. And once we're done with that, we return. Now, if we load up a module this way and we try to run it and nobody exports, this is going to be an error and it's going to crash the flight control software. Later on, as we get into bigger missions and we have parts that can hold larger things, officially, I mean, I'm not talking about the cores I'm using right now that are 100 megabytes, but when we get real kOS modules and they have a limited storage, that limited storage grows somewhat, I can change this over to use some sort of a panic mechanism that will indicate some problems, store some information about the problem, and reboot the software, and hopefully we'll get a clean boot, which will come back after we get connection to the space station, or to our network. So we can either reboot or we can wait for the archive to become available and then reboot. I'm kind of liking the idea of putting up a message every 10 seconds and keeping this going until we see the archive. Then once we've got a firm signal to the archive, then hitting the reboot so everything loads up cleanly and we continue from whatever phase of flight. And there's the next set of development we need to do soon, which is dividing our flights into phases so that we can reboot during a phase and we'll start at the beginning of that phase. And now I remembered what the refactoring I wanted to do was. Part of this stuff that we're doing with try copy from path, when we are obtaining the source code from the archive, we are compiling it in place and we're copying it locally. And this leaves KSM files all over my archive. KSM files that I don't want to check in. Now remember, I'm using Git. So I have all sorts of things I'm doing to check files in and watch the evolution of things and control the configuration of my software. And the KSM files, while I can tell Git to ignore them, I can't really tell VS Code to do that. We end up with send.ksm and search.ksm. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a directory at the top level to store these KSM files. And I'm going to have to do that in Emacs because, well, I'm not exactly sure if this is going to work. Well, let's try this. So at the top level, I want to create a directory called KSM, but I want to put it at the top level, not under P. What if I have rep.org? Nope. Okay. Folder, KSM. So we'll make KSM files that are ksm/packagename.ksm. But inside KSM, I want to do something. So Git will create the KSM tree, but I want it to ignore all the KSM files that are inside. So new file called .git ignore. And here we're just going to say star.ksm. Now I actually ignore KSM files in my git ignore at the top. But that's okay. We'll ignore them globally, but I want to explicitly put this in here because once I get this running and I'm not writing KSM files anywhere else, I can remove it from here and then put a comment in this file saying what this is. I've forgotten what the comment syntax is for git ignore, or I would do it right now. This tells Git to ignore this. So now that we've got the KSM tree, I need to modify Farkos to compile into there. So copy from is the wrong place, and local object folder is like that. And actually, let's just do that. Let's not do that inline. So we want to compile into that object file. Then we want to copy from the object file out to the vessel. Now we never switch between the vessel and the archive. We do all of our archive stuff explicitly with this 0: construct. Now, once we've done this, I could delete the KSM file, but for now, let's keep the KSM file around in this object folder. I might want to look at it, and we've told Git to ignore it, and we can leave the KSM directory closed down here, and that won't keep us from seeing what's going on here. The P directory is really where we're going to be doing most of our work. P and, of course, n/serial, Farkos C/1 or whatever the ship is that we're going to launch. So we've made that change. We should be able to go back to Farkos C and do another launch of it and watch it put the KSM files in the right place. Now, we won't get anything out of this as far as KSP is concerned, but what we will do is verify that our KSM files are handled properly. We'll also verify that I didn't make any mistakes in writing this code. So let's hide the VS Code Editor from the screen, and let's go do a launch. We want Farkos C1. Not sure why I have 2 copies of it here. Oh, and I did a bunch of launches of this to gather some science. Bob never got a chance to fly, so let's send Bob up and get him some experience. Everybody else has done 1 suborbital flight. We have not yet managed to circularize our orbits. Now, before we actually go up, let's take a quick look at the actual Go script for this vehicle. Farkos C1 go.ksm. So I've got go.ksm here. Bug 1. My boot script drops the KSM file in there. Bug 2, I modified the boot file. I didn't reload it. So it's back to vehicle assembly we go. And we got to fix this. Okay, so boot, first of all. Now, if we come to the point where we have to crunch bytes out of this, I'll consider using temporary variables to hold parts of the name and so on, so we don't have to have this whole long name twice and mostly duplicates of it here. But there we go. That places us in the right place. Then inside Farkos. Oh, we didn't change it, but I wonder if I forgot to save. Okay, these annotations tell me where I've made modifications and not checked it in. Now, the sound of the game is actually fairly loud in my ears, so I'm going to go ahead and turn that down. I'm going to try to turn it down. So settings, audio volume. There. That should be slightly less loud. One last step. Now I know that I just modified the boot file, so we go here and we say reread the boot folder, which copies that boot file back from the boot folder that I modified into the spacecraft. We actually have a copy of boot.ks on the vehicle at this point. Black is coffee. There we go. There's our push go to launch button. Let's review our code really quick here. Farkos C go.ks. So what we're going to do is we have done the imports. We tried to set up a terminal, but we are not yet at the point in our career where we can do an action. So we set the size, but we didn't actually pop it up. So I can reach in here and open the terminal. And there it is. And we did come up with a HUD message briefly. The HUD messages don't stick around for very long. So once we hit spacebar, we will ascend facing 90 degrees, so facing east. We'll turn to face east. We'll head to the east and start curving over. And ascend will handle our actual shape. So we want to come up and we want to go over. Remember, orbit is not high, orbit is fast. So you want to curve over. And a perfect gravity turn would be one where you are always thrusting precisely prograde, and you evenly thrust all the way up to, well, not evenly, you thrust all the way up and you hit orbit exactly. Getting the math on that right is kind of hard. And Cheers Kevin did a series where he tried to approximate, he tried over and over again different formulas for how to do the curve. He actually set up some automatic learning to find the proper coefficients. It comes close, but that's the kind of thing you have to do for every spacecraft. And I found some approximate numbers that aren't perfect, they're not optimal, but they're fairly good. And it takes me, as I saw last time, anywhere from 1900 to 2100 meters per second of delta V to get to orbit. That's acceptable. So ascend will handle going up the gravity curve, and it will stop about there when it has pushed the apoapsis of the orbit up. Now we're overpowered, so we're going to be thrusting more than you normally need in a gravity turn for efficiency. Over the long run, I think you get better craft efficiency if you're full throttle, but your thrust to weight ratio is low. Maybe Scott Manley worked out those numbers. I don't know. I just overthrust and get there, and I end up coasting up from 35,000 or 40,000 meters. So here's the coast. Coast U will coast upwards until you're within 30 seconds of apoapsis, and it will stop when you're within 30 seconds or if your altitude is starting to descend. And then we'll circularize, or we will attempt to circularize, and this vessel is going to run out of fuel. And circularize will terminate when we have no more fuel on the craft. That was something we worked out last time. So given that we're dry, we're going to swing ourselves around so we're pointed retrograde, and we're going to stage to get rid of the empty ascent stage, because we know from experience we will run this dry and the auto stager is not going to stage. Oh, the auto stager is established during launch. There's a separate package which looks at all the modules in the spacecraft and figures out what things can stage and when they should be staged, and we want to trigger a stage when it would discard empty fuel tanks and engines that no longer have thrust. And doing that automatically means I don't have to worry in this process about, oh, we want to stop here and stage. You can manually stage, and if you do that, it will probably throw off the auto stager because it's a generated script, which is very specific. In fact, it may crash it. But we'll see. The auto stager worked for me for quite a long time, and I remember I spent many months playing this game using the auto stager and not touching the stage button except to initiate the flight. So we turn around to retrograde. We ditch the empty thing because the auto stager is done. We wait until we're fairly low, and we have been pointing retrograde, orbit retrograde on this. As we come down to the atmosphere, our surface retrograde is different from orbit retrograde, so I'm going to modify this. So when we get down to 40,000 feet, I'm going to lock steering to SRF retrograde, which apparently this doesn't know about. Let me check documentation real quick on that, make sure I haven't messed things up. So KSP it is in ship. I'm not sure whether there's one in the global namespace or not, but I now should be able to say ship surface retrograde like that. If I just put retrograde without the ship in front of it, it's very likely we will crash. So I'm going to start off up here saying print surf retrograde is let's do the same thing for ship. See, I want to use that version. There we go. So if this does what I think it does, we get down to 40,000 feet, we're going to transition from pointing retrograde, orbital retrograde, to pointing surface retrograde. And then we're going to get down there. I'm wondering if retrograde, let me check the documentation on that. Yes, pointing the opposite of the direction of this ship's orbit frame velocity. Yes. So retrograde doesn't magically transition for us. So this is how we transition between retrograde and surface retrograde. And if we get down below 4,000 feet, our surface retrograde should be approximately up. But let's lock the steering to exactly up. So we're pointed straight up, and then we're going to let ourselves fall. Actually, at 10,000 feet, let's transition to pointing up. And at 4,000 feet, we can stage, and I'm going to unlock steering so that we will basically hang from the parachutes without trying to run our RCS wheels to keep ourselves pointed exactly. It also means when we land, if the ground isn't flat, say it's on a hill, we'll end up with the spacecraft here, and that's bad because your RCS wheels are trying to keep you. We're going to let it flop down. Boom. And then we're going to wait forever. So we will hold here. We won't terminate. So we'll never turn over control back to the user until the user hits Control C. So there's our modified flight plan for this launch. Now, I should have followed my own rules and made this Farco C /123 so on each time I change the script so that I can go back to older flights and reproduce it. Not so critical this early on when I'm just barely getting things started, but later on when I start doing things like, fly this guy out to a space station or fly this guy to one specific orbit and then go to a different specific orbit, I will need to be using different serial numbers so I can maintain the repeatability of the earlier flights. So that's got that. We can hide VS code from the stream. And we can think about launching. Is there anything else I need to do before I launch? Well, we need to toggle power to get the new Go script. I believe I have pulled all of the signs available from this particular profile. I ran it a few times. Like I showed you, I got some experience on everybody but Bob. So here we can see that I can access this either as ship surface retrograde or just surface retrograde. So we're good. Let's launch this beast. At this point, hands off. In fact, cup of coffee. Now I've unlocked some science, so we're ready to build the next vehicle configuration, the next stack. This old stack is kind of a wobbly noodle because we didn't have much flexibility in our designs and too much flexibility in the rocket. If I try to do time warp, the instabilities in this physical model being elastic causes it to wobble much worse. And in fact, at some point, it just simply wobbles its way out to crack and land. And in case it wasn't clear from the previous video, I am running the environmental enhancements. It's all set to default. I haven't configured it at all. It's kind of nice to see that we've got, actual communities out there, actual cities with lights and so on. So interior overlay allows us to see through to the interior a bit. Bob's having a good time. Okay, so the first stage is done. Now, this isn't breaking the sound barrier. The speed of sound on Kerbal is, if I remember right, about 430 meters per second, although at altitude, what happens to the speed of sound as you head up and into space? Good question. Anyway, we've just reached the point where we're getting fast enough that even the remaining atmosphere is causing heating. And as we get higher, we're still accelerating. Well, we're not. We MECO'd. And I missed it. Okay, so at 29 kilometers, we shut down this engine. We've fired off about a third of our fuel or so. And we are coasting. MechJeb can tell us about our orbit. I also have MechJeb configured so that every core part provides MechJeb. Again, we're doing engineering here. I'm pretending that we've got the facilities to do this. I want to catch the career save up to the point where we have unlocked all of these things so that I'm not just, playing around with God mode toys. So our apoapsis is at 73 kilometers. Our target was 72, so we overshot a bit. That's okay. The ascent script is set to overshoot because once it does MECO, we still have atmospheric drag that's going to slow us down. So we overshoot by 1,000 meters plus whatever overshoot we get from shutting down the engine suddenly, not being as sudden as we want. And turns out we were high enough here at 29 kilometers that we didn't get significant reduction in our apoapsis from atmospheric drag. So I could probably tune that number quite a bit. Okay, coast apoapsis is complete. We are still ascending, and we're 30 seconds from apoapsis, and we start burning to attempt to circularize. And we run out of fuel. We have raised our periapsis to 35 kilometers. That's still within the atmosphere. So once we get back down there, we're going to still have our ability to land, because we'll hit the atmosphere, and it will slow us down, and we'll land. We have no fuel. We have no engines. And we do have a heat shield. And that stage is going to follow us pretty much. Oh, there's the moon. We're going to go there eventually. So Bob is having a great time. It's his first time up in space. We have actually hit space several times. I'm not sure whether I finished the actual contract to get to space, and if I haven't finished it, I will go pick it up. I need to make sure I have the go to space contract and the orbital contract in place before I do an orbital flight at some point, so I can get that credit. With the parts we unlocked between the last video and this stream, I should be able to build craft that can take passengers. So that's another way of gaining funds. And I need funds so that I can upgrade parts of my base, so that I can build bigger ships and launch heavier ships and do things like actually take Bob out on an EVA, which you can't do yet. And use maneuver nodes and all the other goodness that comes in as you climb your way up the career tree in KSP. So we are about to transition back from orbit back into the atmosphere. And of course, in real life, it's just this gradient, so there's no hard physical line. Of course, everybody agrees that there's this line at a particular altitude called the Kármán line, where you say if you're above the Kármán line, you're in space, and if you're below it, you're not. But there's nothing physical that happens as you go across that line, kind of like nothing physical that happens as you walk across the equator of the Earth. But when that does happen, our camera, which is on auto, is going to swing around and the music will change and nothing much else. I really should have timed my launch so that we were in, we had some light here. If I can figure out a way to turn on some extra lighting, that would be good. Let's see here. Settings. Video and graphics. Ambient light boost. I'm going to turn that up to 50%. Let's see what that does. Oh, that's much better. Now I can see. YouTube probably still keeps that fairly dark, which is good. I mean, we're on the night side, we're in the shadow, but being able to see a little bit makes sense, because if we were actually out here, our eyes would adjust somewhat. And I believe the even starlight is enough that you could make out where the spacecraft was. And if we don't do that, we really, it's just 0 pixels. So I'm good with this. We should be suborbital at this point. Yeah, we're in the upper atmosphere officially. So I'm going to use the warp to speed things up a bit. So officially we are having kOS steer us retrograde. And at 40,000 feet, it will go from steering retrograde to pointing up. Well before that, we should actually be, what was it, 40,000 feet I did that, or 10,000? Might have been 10,000. Looking at the script, it is 10,000 feet. So 40,000 feet, we go from retrograde to surface retrograde, and at 10,000 we go to up. So we're still steering orbital retrograde now. And remember, if you are custom binding keys for time warp, you want the left key to be a jump, and you want the right key to be just do a time step, if you can do that. So if there's some way of configuring an add-on to slow time down, you want the right key to, because, of course, when you're doing the time warp, it's just jump to the left and a step to the right. God, I worked hard on that pun. Not worth it. Never mind. I won't do that again. So we are steering surface retrograde. You notice that we slowed down quite a bit coming through that burning area. So we shed a lot of light, a lot of velocity as heat. And you saw that flick there. That's as we pointed upwards. And let's turn off time warp. And at 4,000 feet, 4,000 meters, we popped the parachute. And I didn't actually notice how fast we were moving, but we were less than 250, which is good. And now we're descending slowly. Okay, it looks like, so the heavier your return thing is, the faster you're going to drop. And I was worried actually that having the service bay, even with only those few experiments, might have made us too fast. But 7 meters a second, I think we're good. I think. Okay, and we have landed. Now, just for the record, let's take a look at the vessel info at the end of the mission. So our landing weight was 1.37, call it 1.4 tons, 1.4 metric tons. So 1.4 metric tons, our landing speed was under 7 meters per second, and we landed without any damage at all. Now, if we had our kOS attempting to keep us pointed, we wouldn't, we'd be wasting a lot of electricity, and we'd be up on a corner and we couldn't do anything. So let's see, can we get any science? Well, first of all, a crew report would be worthless. If I send Bob out EVA, Bob's EVA report is also worthless because we have previously taken a crew report here from the Highlands. With the scripting, it's so repeatable that we always tend to come down kind of in this neighborhood. All of my landings have been within walking distance of here. I probably should have planted flags. I don't know, can I plant a flag? If I plant a flag, can I get back in? Let's see. Lower visor, remove helmet. That's kind of cool. I don't see any way to plant a flag. Darn it. Okay. Now, we do notice that this is something that's new to me because I haven't played kOS or KSP in years. So I'm actually, there are things that have changed that are significant in Kerbal Space Program and in kOS that I have not yet learned. So we're going to go through that together. I noticed as I was scanning through some of the documentation that some of the tricks I've had to pull to make things happen are no longer necessary. There's a special trick I pull to, I want to write a file, but I want to make sure it's clear before I write it. So I log an empty line to it, and then I delete it, and then I open it again. Apparently that's no longer needed, and I'm going to have to work with that, but that will happen when we're focused on just a module for logging events or logging data. I'll go in at that point, we'll work that out. And maybe I'll go back, the set stage script does write a file. It works just fine. It's using the older interfaces. I'm not going to touch it because I don't want to break it. But we'll go back and we'll refactor set script after we get logging of data going. Bob's getting antsy. Bob wants to go back. Can I get him back into the spacecraft? Let's see. I didn't put a ladder on. I don't think I've got ladders. Can I climb this? I should be able to. Okay, so yeah, oh, I almost had it. There we go. And we're boarded again. I didn't really need to board it. I could have recovered him and then recovered the vessel separately, but I kind of like to bring everything together. Okay, and we received 0 science. We got back some of the funds. We spent some money building this spacecraft. We got back a little bit of funds from recovering the parts. And the important thing is that Bob got himself some experience points. So now we notice that everybody's got some experience. I'm going to see if I can do the entire career with the minimum number of Kerbals. So I won't be actually recruiting any Kerbals until I've got a situation where I have active flights out there and I don't have a pilot or an engineer or a scientist that I actually need for a mission. So we're not going to spend money. Besides, hiring these guys ain't cheap. Currently I could have 5 people. So what can we do for upgrades here? We have 255,000 funding. It would cost us 50,000 to upgrade our launch pad to be able to handle vessels that are go from 20 meters to 36 meters, so taller vessels, and weight from 18 tons to 140 tons. So we will probably need that. I will upgrade that when I have a vessel that is too tall or too heavy to launch. Vehicle assembly building controls the number of parts, and that will take 225,000 funds to upgrade. We could do that and we wouldn't have any funds left over to do anything else. The tracking station, currently we can see orbits in the map, and if we upgrade it with 150K funds, we can see patch conics. Those will be interesting when we start to plan the more complicated flights, like when we go for our first orbital rendezvous, or when we go for our first try to go get to the moon or get to Minmus, or God forbid, escape from Kerbin's SOI. R&D, currently we have a limit of 100 research science, which means there will be a limit on how far up the tree we can go until we spend 450,000. So when we do that upgrade, we'll get it to be able to go to 500 science, and we'll have some abilities we can use. Astronaut complex required for off-world EVA surface samples. So if we landed on the moon right now, which we can't, we wouldn't be able to take surface samples and return them, which is a really valuable thing to do. But we upgrade this, we'll be able to do that. Also, if we upgrade this, we'll be able to move resources from stage to stage, which might be important. What else can we do here? Astronaut complex. Right now, we can have 5 Kerbals, and they can only get out of the craft when it's on Kerbin. So no EVAs in orbit, in the atmosphere, no EVAs on the moon. 75,000 funds will be able to perform EVAs and place flags. Well, that looks like something I'm going to want to do. It also means I can get 12 Kerbals going. Because EVA on orbit gets you science, and as you pass over different biomes, you get separate science for observing over each biome, or at least you did way back when. I'm hoping that's still the case, because that's one way of getting a lot of science very quickly. So that's 75,000 funds. We could do the astronaut complex upgrade so we can get, do the astronaut complex upgrade so that we can, not mission control. There. Astronaut complex so we can get EVAs done and upgrade the launch pad for bigger vessels, and think about the tracking station for the future. But I'm thinking just initially the complex and the launch pad, and get some funding so that we can build ships bigger than 30 parts. For now, we're going to limit ourselves to 30 parts. But let's not do that until we actually construct the vessel that requires it. So what contracts do we have available? Observational surveys, go places and look at things. These are great if you do airplanes, but with spacecraft, trying to get a spacecraft to a specific location is kind of insane. You really want to do these with aircraft. So, this one is 2 tourists that want to go suborbital. So the next question is, can I build a tourist launch? Now, I know this because I've done it once. It is possible to set up a vessel that has a normal capsule. If you put a tourist in it, you can't control it because you don't have a probe core, and you don't have a real astronaut. You've got a tourist. Tourists can't punch buttons. You can't even launch. In fact, kOS can't launch because it can stage and it can turn up the throttle, but the spacecraft doesn't go anywhere. Literally, it doesn't go anywhere. It sits there on the launch pad with all the sound and fury of a launch, and it just sits there. I've tried this, but you can put a Stay-Putnik, a probe core, on top of it, and that will allow KSP to control the spacecraft. So we could take this. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and take it. I'm going to commit. Well, let's build the spacecraft first and then come back and grab it. So we've got tourists. We've got test a radial decoupler while splashing down. We could do a really quick mission to go build a small spacecraft that has one of these radial decouplers on it and fly it and splash down and test it and get, let's see, we'd get 5,400 funding to start. Completing it, we get 14,000 plus science and reputation, and we've got a year to do it. That's actually a really good one. What else have we got? Test a heat shield. So let's take up a small heat shield. It'd be between 29,000 and 40,000 feet between those speeds, and hit a test button. I'm not sure what my speeds are in those altitude ranges. I think what I want to do is build a test rocket, which I can turn into this take a tourist thing, and I want to gather data from it that says what my altitude is and what my speed is, so I can look at those curves and I can say, well, this spacecraft can do this, and this spacecraft can't. So I've got 2 of these. Then we have testing a radial mount drogue chute. Drogue chutes are like parachutes, but you can pop them at a higher speed, and they don't slow you down as much. But a drogue chute can get you slow enough that your real chute can pop. So this says I want to test it between 10,000 and 14,000 feet, moving at those speeds. Again, having some information about what our altitude and speed is during the flight would be very useful. And finally, there's a test to test a Mark 55 liquid fuel engine on an escape trajectory out of Kerbin. This is beyond our reach right now. I don't believe I can. I might be able to build a vessel to escape Kerbin's SOI. But it would be a major undertaking, and we've got a bunch of things we can do before that. So we're thinking in terms of a vessel that can be modified to take tourists or take test assets and logs its telemetry on the way up. We also want to be hitting the orbit thing. I already have that active, so I can only take one contract until I've done an orbit. So when I'm building this vessel, I want to be able to get to orbit with it. So I want a probe core, a space for a Kerbal to sit, and the ability to get into orbit. And my existing craft doesn't have enough oomph to get there. And unless I write a whole bunch of code to estimate how much it's going to cost me to get there, I'm just going to do the normal Kerbal thing where I'm going to add more stuff until I've got enough oomph. Now we know it's about 2,000 delta V, give or take, to get up there. did I wiped out my log file, unfortunately, so I don't recall the total delta V. We can look at it in the craft, though. So Farco C1, I remember that it took about 2100 delta V to get to orbit. And it has 1500 in the first stage and 1200 in the second stage. And I think it was like 600, and it was making a good try at getting there. I'm going to aim for like 4000 delta V. So let's start building the next big guy. Let's open up and create a, cancel. New. This is Farkos. I'll use Farkos as the indicator that this is a development platform for Farkos. Configuration D. I will shift away from Farkos when we shift away from carrying 100 megabytes of storage. That will be an interesting day when we unwrap that configuration, and I'm limited to just using the kOS parts. So, we have some upgrades here. Oh, I forgot about this. Crew capacity of 2. So the KV-2P can carry a pilot and a tourist. Yes! I don't have to fiddle around with putting a Staputnik on top of a command pod. So the Orion, we got the Orion, which is 1 person, and the P, which is 2 people. Oh, and there's right there, tolerance, 12 meters per second of impact. So if I've got nothing underneath this guy, and he lands at 12 meters per second, he can survive. That's good. What's the difference between these two? The Mark 1 can tolerate a slightly higher impact. They've got the same G tolerance, the same pressure tolerance. The P has higher temperature tolerance, higher temperature internal, but lower, slightly higher external as well. Ejection force of 10. This guy doesn't have an ejection force. Oh, the P must, I bet you the P has a separator built in. Yep, separator. So ejection force it's got an applicator, so it's got its own built-in heat shield. Oh, that's nice. And it carries electric charge. Notice it doesn't carry any monopropellant. We don't have RCS stuff. Well, we haven't used RCS stuff yet, so it's not important. But I could have saved some weight on the command pods by draining out that 10 units of monopropellant. I should have done that, and I didn't. The other thing is the P is more expensive. So one guy here, the Onion is still the same cost. When we go up to 2 guys, it does cost us. So if I'm going to do this, we're going to be committing to taking passengers to defray the cost. We could do that because I'd have a contract out there right now with 2 tourists, and I believe you could always get tourists. So put that in place, and we do indeed have a staging that comes up, so we're good. Let's review what new parts we've got really quickly. I've got a solid rocket booster. These are very nice. I've got the LVT-30, which is a basic oomph, get us there. Difference between these two, the T-45 is steerable, so you don't need to depend on RCS wheels or RCS jets to turn. You can just use your engine, and it's really responsive. We've been using this. The T-30 is different. It's slightly lighter, same impact tolerance. It has much higher thrust. So we go from 160 kilonewtons up to 200 in a vacuum 215 to 240. It's not telling us what the ISP is. There we go. Engine ISP goes from 250 to 320 on the swivel. And it goes 265 to 310. So the LVT-30 is slightly better at ground level, but the T-45 is slightly better in vacuum. And that kind of matches what we want to do, because launching, we're going to be using big fixed engines to get a lot of thrust. That'd be the LVT-30 and the solid rocket boosters. Once we get up into space, we're going to want to use engines that themselves can help us turn, so we're not spending electricity on wheels and so on. We just fire up the engines and it'll keep us pointed in the right direction. So yeah, this will be our launch engines, and this will be our upper stage engine. Eventually I'm going to want a smaller engine. We don't have it unlocked yet. Fuel. We've got T100s and T200s. T200s are what I used before. T100s are half the size, half the fuel, half the weight. You know the drill. We'll use those when we start fine-tuning our fuel loads. Command and control is new. This is our first actual kOS part. This is what I was stretching for. For this flight, I will continue to have the larger parts because I don't want to get out of KSP and reconfigure it right now. But this means that we can shut off the processor in the main core and use the processor in the scriptural control system and see if we still, fit in our 10 kilobyte capacity. That's the important thing. Now, once we eject this, this stage here, this is going to eject the control system. We're going to put it there. When we do the final eject of this guy, we no longer have a kOS processor on board because we're going to turn off the processor on the main guy. The other thing is we've got MechJeb 2. I have been using MechJeb because it's attached to all of my core files. That's also something I'm going to turn off, so that we are going to require a MechJeb 2 to be present. I'll put it further down on the stack. Inline reaction wheel. This guy is fairly small and provides additional control authority to point the rocket. I will add that if I need it. We need this because this is how I'm going to be running kOS from now on. Structural. Modular girders. Don't really need it at this point. Not sure. I think this is the hatch we come out of. I haven't used these in a long time. I'm not sure which way you're facing, which way is up. Well, we'll see. When I command that rocket to face east, we'll see how it turns. Don't have robotics yet. This guy has a coupler. We'll grab couplers later. We do have radial decouplers now, so I can build out sideways. I don't have to build a pool noodle again. Payload. Service bay. Now, we can do that, or we can get clever. I am going to put my kOS processor inside the service bay. And then I'm going to put my experiments underneath here. We'll end up probably clipping some of the science together. We'll work that out. Aerodynamics. We've got the ones we had before, but we also have steerable turrets. So now when we launch, I can use aerodynamics to steer my aircraft, so I don't need to use my turnable engine. I can get better efficiency out of the other one. We'll come back to this when we need it. We have landing struts, so if I build something that needs landing struts, I can use that. For now, I'm going to skip it. Thermal. This guy has a built-in thermals. I don't need a heat shield. You got radiator panels, so you can radiate away heat. Yay! Those will come in handy. Electrical batteries for those long cold orbits. This guy requires electricity. Not a whole lot, but it does require some. So what I'm going to do is tuck in a couple of battery packs. We'll find out later how much we need. Now, I could do this the Kerbal way and put none in and just, go with it. But I'm not feeling that. What I will do, though, so I'm going to see if I can make the little battery lights visible from outside. Can I see from the outside here at all? Butter. Okay, do this one first. In fact, I'm going to do this up at the top. Like that. There. I have no qualms at all about clipping things. If it looks cool, that's great. Unfortunately, getting a hold of it is going to be a bit of a trick. There. Let's make it look like I want it to look. I just want the little LED to be out there. There we go. And now we need to put our control back in. Like that. Nice and compact. Communication. We're going to fly a pilot and a tourist. We could put one of these on in case we're flying two tourists. Although I think what I would do is put a Communitron on further down. How is the cost on these? These are all 300. High gain is important if we go farther out. I don't think we need a high gain antenna. We'll consider one of these antennas. Science. Because we're still futzing around here with the. Essentially, this is part of the descent stage, so we'll be ditching this last. Oh no! If we ditch this, we lose our science. So when we're doing science, we need somebody to EVA to go pick the science up out of this stuff, so that we can pull the science in and land with it. Okay, so let's assume that we're flying with a scientist. That actually looks pretty good. I wonder if that's going to have some Z-fighting involved. It might. So we can pick up the science from here. We still need a place to put mystery goo and thermometers. How big is the experiment storage unit? Can I put it inside? I haven't fiddled with these yet. I wonder if it's possible to have to click on the experimental storage unit and have it just grab science for you, or if you have to actually EVA to get the science. Worth experimenting. I will move that down with the move tool later on. Cargo and utility. We need a parachute. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to move this down. That leaves just enough that I can get my fingers on it. Now, actually, I used to be able to stash all of my science here. So really, the only reason for this is to see if I am able to transfer science. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build this part up. I'm going to send it out to the launching area and see if we can move the science from our experiments into the storage area, or if we just want to use the control pod for that. Okay, so science. Mystery goo, thermometer, and barometer are what I want to put inside there somehow. You can put it inside there, I can put it in there. We only want one mystery goo. I want to place it in here somewhere, like that. And put these where I can reach them. And this guy clips onto here, so it doesn't prevent that. So now I have access to everything. So this is really just the upper stage of Farkos D1. Let's save this. And let's see what happens when I get out there. Crew will start off with a scientist and a pilot. So the question is, can we do the experiments and move the science into either the pod or the storage area without getting out? So let's see here. Conduct materials study. And that gets us some decent size, decent science. And I noticed a storage requirement for the science itself. Let's do it for all of them. Now these are going to be minimal science at this point because we've done it already. Oh, we haven't logged our pressure at the ground level. I think if we got this working right, I'm going to do a recovery on this configuration just to get this additional science in. So, close the doors. So, oh, we have it open. What have we got here? Transfer data. Select a part so I can transfer it to the pod or to the storage area. Target switching locked. Okay, so I can't transfer it to the pod, but I can transfer it here. Warning, removing the experiment data will render this module inoperable. That's good. I can send a scientist out to reset it if I want to do this more than once. I'm going to don't show this again because I am well aware of what this does. So materials study from Launchpad added. So this is, we do need the materials unit because clicking on the pod didn't allow me to transfer. So here, transfer data. Okay. Here, transfer data. at some point I want to work out how to transfer the data from kOS. So let's bring up I'm going to file that as a ticket in GitHub against the GitHub repo. Let's see here. Can I do this? Supposedly I have all sorts of integrations here. So I want to create an issue. I will come up with some decent labels for these things. I do know that as you start getting more and more issues from professional work, being able to classify them is important. Okay. Okay, so what I want is to be able to import a module that can run this experiment or that experiment or the other experiment. I want to be able to import modules that can transfer science data into storage. If there's a way of triggering a crew report, that would be cool to have as well. Especially if you could do things like, if I collect a crew report now, will I get any science out of it, or is it a zero? Automatically collecting a crew report whenever you can get science, then stuffing it into storage so you can collect another report, that'd be great. Now, I really doubt I can do anything EVA, because when you are EVA, you are not under the control of kOS. So, is it even possible? If you are EVA but attached to the vessel, is kOS still running? If it is, can it say, get an EVA report? Can we later then transfer the EVA report into storage? This is all something that would be ultra cool to be able to automate as we are on orbit, flying over biome after biome, seeing you have a new biome, collecting the report and stashing it in the short period of time before you transition to the next biome would be really nice. That's actually worth working out. That may be our next thing. So that's got the issue. I am not sure what causes this issue to be updated to GitHub. If I do that, did it create it? I don't think it did. I talked about it, I wrote it, I saved it, and it went nowhere. Oh, can't run and debug. This is not something I can run and debug. Open on GitHub. Okay. That opened my browser pointing at the issues area. So I hit create an issue and it brings the editor back up with the markdown. Ah, there it is. Create issue. Says pop-up. The following labels don't exist in this repository. Science. Do we want to create the label? So I'm going to go ahead and create the label. It's a pop-up that's not showing on the video. So we create it. Issue created. Yay! Source, GitHub pull requests and issues. And if I go through my browser, which it opened up, I see that we have an issue. And notice here under no milestone, we have transfer science. And if I click on the globe here, it actually opened it up in the browser. And if I hit the right arrow, it puts it up under transfer science, under recent and created issues. Well, that's pretty cool. And now it's a square that says stop working. Oh, okay, so now I am working on the issue. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to not work on this issue for the moment. So the right arrow is start working on issue and check out topic branch. So that would actually creates a topic branch for me. Let's take a look at what that did. It should have created the branch locally and then okay, so we have an issue 1 branch that it created. I don't believe this actually changed any files. So that's how the issues work. We want to get back on the main branch for now. It may be that we do all our work in these issue branches and from now on we do an integration. We've closed the issue. What I want to do is delete this branch. Compare with head, copy SHA. I am not quite familiar with. Okay, so this is still the current branch. Good. Delete branch. We will make that active and create the branch again when we start working on it. But that does show that I can create an issue and create a Git branch to start working the issue on. Cool. We actually show the terminal stuff here. And do my edits, and then I can use appropriate tools in Git to then integrate that into the repository. I'm still going to continue to. How do I get rid of this? Boom. X. Git lens, you're being a butthead. There. There we go. I can continue working the way I have been, but for actual code updates, we can go through this issue process, and I can set up a branch, and we can write the code, we can get it working, and then I can use a PR to bring it back into the main line. Initially, this is going to be kind of clunky because we're going to be working on one thing at a time. But later on, if we start doing some major development along some lines and we want to go back and forth, this will make things work better. It also means that if anybody wants to jump in and start collaborating on this, we have a way of doing that. Talking to you, Rob. Okay, so we have verified that indeed there is a way of doing it manually, and that's good enough for now, for this flight. So now I can either revert to the launch pad or revert to the area, or we can go ahead and do a recovery and get all this delicious science. I'm going to recover a vessel. So Farkos D1 was the official experiment vessel. I'm going to make a note of that. In fact, let's start a habit of putting log files in here. So we need to create, I'm going to do this in Emacs. It's just that much more comfortable for me. Make sure this isn't. There we go. In Farkos D1. So let's do a log.org file inside the flight. This flight verified used only the top bit of the stack down through science to verify that we can run experiments and transfer results back to storage without a scientist, Kerbal, going EVA. We picked up 11.8 science. We recovered some funds from the cost of making it. We got no reputation. There we go. Okay, and back to here. So I can edit org files in VS Code. It's just a little clunky. I've loaded up something that highlights it properly, but if we ever do something fancy like embedding Python's stuff and so on, I don't expect that the org format support for VS Code is going to include all of the fancy things that the org mode in Emacs provides. So I think at this point I'm going to stop the stream and see what we got for the video, and we will work out where we're going next with building this craft.